Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, my precious pack, and welcome back once more to Vega Conflict. The Catalyst event has come to a close, and I'm going to read the ending of the transmission that was received from it. Because it caught my interest, a very specific part did, and I'm going to point it out afterwards. Did anyone else see that? I had Bishop in my sights, then these machines phased in using technology I've never encountered. Bishop escaped in the crossfire, but I won't let him get away next time. My thirst for revenge blinded me today. Luckily, Tatiana arrived just in time to pull me out of the burning vessel, because she crashed a harvester into the fortress, or whatever it was he was being protected within. Rebels, after seeing you fight against Umbra, I'm willing to put bad blood aside for our common cause and Bishop's empire once and for all. And that was from Curious. Now, I would just like to point something out to everybody. For anybody who doesn't watch the concept ideas, I want you to go back and have a look at a certain ship type. And that was the support vessels. And how was it that they got around in combat? How was it that they joined the fight? They were unmanned drones that I described as autonomous, individually pre-programmed machines that you would launch them, they would support your vessel, and then they would return afterwards on their own if they were not destroyed. In which case, they would be towed back and be repaired just like any other ship. This little statement seems a lot like that. If you guys want, you can go back and have a look at the concept idea. It's among all my concept ideas, but I found it very interesting. This was just so close, and it was, and I'm going to read it again. I had Bishop in my sights. Then these machines phased in using technology I've never encountered. Now, my idea wasn't far-fetched from that. They weren't going to phase in, but they were going to be effectively thrown through a gravity acceleration well, which would push them just below the speed of light. And the objective of that would be to actually ensure that they reach their target. However, due to the speed at which they're being thrown, you're actually using physics for this. No living entity would be permitted within or on the ship during the time that it was launched, and they would all be autonomous. Because no human being, no Altarian or anything like that, no species that I'm aware of can survive certain G's worth of gravity, because after a certain point, a human being would just be crushed regardless of how soft the material is behind them. Their body would be turned to pulp or whatever you want to call it. So the objective of the concept idea was to make it so that, more or less so that the target would be thrown and it would be an autonomous ship. And the support ships were described as robotic, smaller versions of ships already have in the game. However, upon revising it, it could have been any number of things. They could have been truly robotic ships that were launched at slower than light, but almost light speed, via literally just throwing it, just like how a child would take a slingshot and a rock. That's effectively what you'd be doing, because it would accelerate it faster than what the child would be able to throw the rock to begin with. And I read that, and again, I was just very interested by that one little proportion of the transmission. Normally I don't bring them up because they're just not that interesting, but I saw that, and my hope is that it's either them introducing a new type, and them introducing the next tier to us, which are going to be robotic, which would be extremely cool, because it'll be the first type that we've had like that I'm aware of publicly. But I also hope that they're not the primary tier and they actually become like a support vessel similar to what I described, to more or less enlarge the number of ships that we can bring into combat. Because remember, what I also said was that you could launch them during combat to a set point by dragging them into combat at a certain location wherever you're viewing it from, including at the beginning of combat. And there was a total of 3 additional ones you could launch. However, everyone didn't like the idea, and after I rethought about it, it was weak, because I told everyone that the ships would be weaker in their base variants because they'd be half as small, they'd deal half as much damage, they would have lower base weight and everything like that. So upon revision, I thought it would be much better to actually have them just be standard sized ships, launching a set of 3 that you can essentially position anywhere you want, just like in the concept idea. So you could launch them behind the enemy AI fleet. So if you need an advantage to take them out from behind or anything like that, you launch them that way. However, something else that occurred to me is that they weren't being warped in. They were just being thrown. They would impact the ship and destroy themselves. Well, with the idea of them phasing in, it'd be much more interesting because it's like short-range teleportation. The matter gets torn apart, energized, sent along a localized, weak ionization field, which may be partially tuned to the level of the object, and rematerialized at a different location after following each and every single individual cell to the alternative location via the low level of ionization or alternatively high level of ionization between one location and another. But it would be very interesting, and now with this they've caught my interest. And I really would love to see them start sharing sneak peeks or something like that. As I mentioned previously, giving us a peek at something, especially after that, it's much more cool. So, you know, go over early models or things like that you typically wouldn't put in the game because you kept revising them. But show us, because it could be interesting and fun to talk about, as well for the players that are more interested in making up lore for the game, it could give them something to do as well. But on to the second half of this video, and that is specifically the Catalyst event. I'm going to do a general review for it. I only hit level 90s the entire time because mostly the prizes I wanted were right there. But overall, I'm going to talk about the prize list, targets, and my general thoughts on it, as well as how it could have been improved, but wasn't, and as well as how it could have been much worse. So first, I'm going to get a drink. Then I'm going to talk about the prizes. I already listed off all of the recommended prizes for everyone, so that there isn't a need for me to talk about that again here. Regardless of what you've got, just go ahead and take a moment to scroll down through the prizes. We actually have an extremely large number of prizes available to us to purchase, not counting resources or time tokens, because at times you may need them, at times you may not. Boxes, they're good for everyone, especially if you're just trying to build up low-level fleets to assist you in farming if you're high level, or if you're low level trying to step into the higher tier and that box has that tier in it. The overall prize list is fairly decent, but it's not as varied as it could be, because it's all focused on Umbra, with the primary prize being of Axis tier, but there is actually no Axis weaponry, specials, or anything else within the store. It's all related to Altarian or above, and Altarian vessels, well, the Altarian blueprint for the shells are right here as well. You only get one of them, and it's the energy, but it wasn't enough. So on this part, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually recommend what could have been done. Second, prizes and things like that. So what could have been done for the store that could have made it more open for all persons involved? Well, for one, similar to how we have individual tabs under the shop, we should start getting whenever prizes are in this massive list. Take the time to code in an additional set of tabs, and under those tabs have the rewards and things like that for the lower levels, because the Harvester is not a top tier ship or anything like that, as we all know. And it's not meant to be top tier, it's meant to be the Dreadnought Harvester of Axis tier, which is tier 6. And it is meant just for them. They can use it as either a jump ship, combat ship, or both if they want. However, again, they could break this up into tabs and have it so anything related to Umbra is in an Umbra tab, anything related to additional prizes such as Harvester would be in a secondary tab. Resources could go in any tab or just be left out in the open outside of the tabs. It would just be to help clean up all of this stuff so it's not all like the way it is now. As for base tech, it could go in the Axis tab or whatever tab it correlates to based on the technology that it was built off of. But that was just an idea because when I was scrolling through it originally, I saw that it was extremely clustered, and it would look much more clean if everything was under certain tabs, so that you'd have certain items that weren't with one another, such as the wormhole drive being near Sunder thrusters, or any number of other Umbra or Altarian technologies. So each one was in a specific tabs. You know, these would all be in an Axis tab, this would be in an Altarian tab, these would be an Altarian tab, these would be Altarian tabs, and things like that. This would be in the base tab, this would be in an Altarian, actually no, this would be an Axis tab because of what it's based off of. And the prize boxes, tokens, things like that, they'd be in according tabs as well. So Altarian time tokens would be in an Altarian tab, Axis would be in an Axis. But as for the boxes, depending on their prizes, I wouldn't say to put them in any tab, I would just leave them out in the open, along with the resources, because they're not associated with any one specific faction. Okay, now before this video started, what all of you saw was the level 70 that was just being infamous for destroying and dealing a bunch of damage, and it was the level 70 Fiend. So I decided I was going to hit it, and what you all saw was just me sitting around with the behemoth. Now what you didn't realize was I wanted to soak up the damage because I wanted to see just how much it would do, and then I would multiply it out and take the damage equivalent over to my lower level Axis tier ships and that fleet, which is only level 82. And the repair time wouldn't have been all that worth the mediocre 40,000 intel payout. Not even close. But there was a bright side to it in some sort of a way. Well, actually it wasn't a bright side. Now that I think about it, it wasn't bright at all. You were literally caged in. This is something I'd like to bring up. Why is it that you low levels are not permitted to run away from your targets because you've got a wall of blight behind you? But us higher levels, the blight is just more spaced out, and we have space to turn, run, kite the enemy, or alternatively lure them through certain areas where we can just set up an ambush or dig in a little bit more easily towards the corner of the map or something like that, where we can more or less cluster all the enemies and just bombard them to death. You guys don't really get to do that because you have a literal wall of blight right behind your spawn in that attack. You have one advantage though over something that we don't. Typically, the vast majority of a high-level AI fleet will start to attack immediately. In the 70s, smaller sections attacked at a time, but one thing I did notice, between the level 70 targets and the level 90s that I've been hitting the entire event, the level 70 targets' health was not off as much as it could have been. And what I mean is they needed to have lower health values or have the base health value of their ships and have no additional armor or anything like that on the ships, because when I was attacking them, they were going down around as quickly as the 90s do. Now that's not a good thing because it takes my behemoths 2 to 3 barrages to damage and heavily damage and possibly destroy certain ships of the Umbra faction. And these are in the level 90s. Now it took 1.5 up to 2, possibly 3 barrages just to hit certain targets, which is no surprise because blight missiles they don't always hit the target because of the spread on them, and we all know that they have a blind spot. But the rest of the weapons that they were being hit with should have heavily damaged them, but some of them survived the initial barrage and had to be shot again. And remember what I said, it's taking 2 to 3, possibly 4 to destroy targets level 90, and it's taking 1.5 to 2, possibly 3 if the target is being missed, which can be accounted for, to destroy them level 70, indicating they have a decent pool of health over their base amount. If it was just the base amount, then the harvester, well, in this case, not the harvester, the behemoth, would have destroyed them each in exactly 2 attacks because it would have been more damaging than what they had health. Some of them, they were taking a lot more damage. Specifically, the cruisers. The frigates, they die quickly no matter what they're equipped with. But the cruisers, I don't know if they had ablative armor or not. I'm going to have to watch the video back, but I'm not going to watch it back now because I'm already talking about it. But the 70s, I can see what everyone was complaining about. You're put up against targets that are... They have a little bit too much health. Their damage seemed to actually be balanced, partially, but the health wasn't, so they were surviving much longer than they should have in a fight, especially when the player's outnumbered. The player is more or less put in, so you have to go up against them, so it would have been more efficient to just take a rush fleet because you have your back effectively up against a wall. Well, not completely up against the wall. You can actually back away. But they need to consider targets a little bit more carefully. And while I'm on that subject, let's talk about the Catalyst targets. Umbra targets were the primary focus as usual, which is no surprise because the primary theme was Umbra. And it was specifically going against the next set of targets, which was the high tier boss class targets that are co-opable for players to do whatever they want with. A few players were attacking them, but most people were doing what I was doing. They were using behemoths or any number of other ships to destroy level 90s. I didn't see many people going out hitting level 80s or 70s. I saw lower levels farming in the 60s and the 50s, but never the 70s and the 80s because of how difficult they were. Now, I never got to attack the 80, but I was told that it was similar to the 70 in the case that you weren't allowed to retreat. And I don't know if that was correct or not because I never attacked them, so I can't vouch because some people, they will lie. So I can't vouch for them. But what I can say about the 70 is it was broken, it was damaged. And again, on this note, similar to the store tab where we had separated prizes, where they could have been separated further into individual tabs, we needed different targets specifically for the lower levels. We needed older targets, not lower levels, pardon, just for Axis tier players, Xeno Division tier players to advance. Altarian players, they would most likely be hitting the Umbra vessels and stuff like that because they'd be advancing into the Umbra tier. So theirs was fine, but the primary prize was a Axis ship, the Harvester. However, there were no Axis related targets. There were no Harvesters, Reapers, or anything related to the aliens at all. Actually, can we even call them aliens now? Because they're being cloned. I think we can just call them clones. But regardless, the targets need to be slightly more varied. There needed to be a separation. This is, again, another thing. All Umbra class targets, regardless of level, should have been thrown into the Carmine Nebula. Just for everybody that's higher level, or for anyone that can fight the Umbra targets, they should have all been in that sector. Whereas standard alien targets should have been spawning in the player sector, so that the Axis tier, Xeno Division tier could have just been going around the sector doing their thing, farming for their points toward their Harvester. Whereas higher tier players such as me that were after any new prizes, well, in this case I didn't collect anything because reusable items are not an interest of mine. But they could have all, again, been put in the Carmine Nebula for us to all congregate to and fight in there. Now, that's part of it. The other part is the target's difficulty. If they're going to be featuring Umbra targets or unique targets and not spreading targets out so there's a little bit of something for everyone somewhere, they need to consider target balance based on the rewards that they offer in the prize store. In this case, let's use the Harvester as an example. It was an Axis tier 6, and in comparison to Behemoths, it won't be able to farm everything that the Behemoths can, because it doesn't have dual firing arcs that overlap to double its standard damage off the ship. It doesn't have extremely high amounts of health, extremely high amounts of damage. Well, that's actually a lie, because before Harmonics you can get towards just a little shy of 13,000. But you can also use it as a jump ship and things like that. But again, the targets should have been slightly more based on what the prizes were. And a little more thought should go into it from now on to consider lower level players that may be going after lower level tech in an event for high level players. So occasionally, if you're going to do that, ensure that the target price is right. Ensure that there are always going to be targets for the players that are going to be working for old tech by fighting old tech targets. That just doesn't sound right calling it old tech. But I'm positive you all understand. And make sure that they're balanced and they're not altered in any way. Or alternatively, if you're not going to modify them or anything like that, change some of the lower level targets to be slightly easier for their points payout, or increase the points payout of certain targets that are already easy, but their points payout is too mediocre, because you also have to consider time frame limits. Some people can spend more time in the game than I can, which is slightly horrifying, because I effectively have all the time in the world. Well, sometimes. but even they cannot spend 40 hours in-game a day when we only have 24 hours in the game, 24 hours per day period. And many people would say just farm multiple targets using multiple low-level insta-fleets or something like that. It does work, but you still have to produce them, and then you have to deal with the repair costs, which at times can empty you if you don't have a steady form of income of additional resources, or if they can't carry enough to actually more or less negate the negative effects of having to insta-repair rand cores or something like that over a long period of time. So targets needed to be slightly more rethought than what they were this time. The prize store was actually fairly decent for once. Actually, it was actually extremely good. But it was far too clustered up for everyone. And again, I would have liked it to be broken up into tabs, but it wasn't. So I guess the overall event, let's think of that for a minute. The overall event, the targets were they're Umbra, so they're not going to be balanced towards the lower levels, they're going to be balanced towards higher level players. The prize list includes lower level targets, well, lower level items, but with no primary valuable way to earn intel to purchase them at a overinflated price. And then the introduction of all reusable items for the Blight specials. Now that didn't interest me, and I'm just not going to talk about it. On a scale, actually not even on a scale, hit or miss, the way I used to do this. Was the event a hit or a miss? I'm going to have to give it a miss just because of the targets. They were no problem for me because I already farmed up everything I wanted from the store. But considering the lower levels and their prize in there of the Dreadnought, it was a bit sad. But hopefully it will come back in Decimation or something that involves targets for the lower levels. They're a little bit more balanced than Umbra. But this is all I wanted to talk about, everybody. If you have anything to say, or if I may have missed anything, feel free to state it below in the comments section, as always. If you have any interest in actually discussing anything in-game, you can say so in the comments section, or you can message me in-game, which most players do. If you have anything that you would like to add to what I've said, or if you have prize recommendation lists different than what I stated previously, feel free to leave that in the comment section below as well as target recommendations, things like that for Kixeye to consider during the next event, that we may have lower level content in a high level focused event. Let's just leave it at that. But that's going to be it, everybody. Be safe out there in the void, and as always, I'll see you later.